after I closed the antique shop, I had a bunch of stuff left over, and I set up at a flea market.
Yeah.
And I had paintings just stacked up everywhere. And I was selling some, but it was kind of dead. And this guy come up and he started making stacks, piles of paintings. And I was like, oh my God, this guy loves my taste.
Yeah.
He's buying a big stack of painting. And I talked to him about them, and he's like, these are really amazing. And he gives me his card, and he was the director of the Museum of Bad Art.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All right, Dan Reynolds. I'm excited about this conversation. You've been a customer framing all sorts of stuff. Just had us by to see the collection.
Yes.
And also have lyric vendors in Marshfield. So we had a lot to talk about talking about framing music and presenting it like on your walls.
Cool. I'm looking forward to it.
So you're, you got your start as dealing like antiques.
Yeah. So my first shop I opened up back in 2012 was an antique shop called Gentleman and Daughter. And I was a stay-at-home dad at the time. My daughter was about 5 years old, so she needed me a little less at home.
Yeah.
So I was like, I think I can branch out and do something on the side. So we opened that up together in Situate. And we had that for 5 years. It was a lot of fun.
And did you have a history in that sort of thing, or is that something you like decided you'd learn about as you were, going?
Both. Yeah, I learned on the fly and on the job a little bit, but I was a history teacher, so I loved American history. And because of that, I think I was drawn to the way people lived back in times, with well-made furniture and beautiful paintings on the wall and rugs and stuff like that. So I was just attracted to the beauty of furniture and art. And so it was fun to be able to have my own space, my own office that I could decorate and design in my, what I saw as a cool place to hang out or live. So,
yeah, that's, I mean, whenever, you've talked to me about things, it's, the knowledge seems like it's, it's overwhelming.
Yeah, there's so much to know. And being in the antique business, it can be dangerous. You can be late on a trend, or you buy something that a lot of times, has been refurbished and you didn't know. Or in the 80s and 90s, we had a lot of stuff that was being repopped, they call it, so they were faking antiques. So you have to be very careful about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And learning on the way. And there's so much to know. Artists, furniture makers, So
yeah, so there's a lot of fakes out there too.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of fakes, and then there's a lot of people that didn't copyright their designs, like the Eames. So you have everybody making cool Eames chairs, and they look like it, but they don't wear like it, and they're not made with the quality, So you have to be careful when you're buying, especially high-priced, high-end furniture.
Yeah, that's interesting, because how many people, I mean, you want the real thing, but if it looks like the real thing or functions like the real thing, does it make a difference?
Yeah, so that's where you get into the mind of a collector, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing with records. They're pressing records right now that are reissues that some of them sound great, some of them don't sound great. But if you don't want to dole out the money for a first press, you can get a reissue for $25 and $30. So if you want it to listen to, or you want the chair to sit in, it's a different mentality than if you're trying to collect. I've always been drawn to listening to something that it's the way they heard it when it first came out.
Yeah.
Like I want to hear what somebody heard in '67 when Sgt. Pepper's came out,
Yeah, so interesting too, because that's like probably the same idea as art, right?
Yeah.
Like you want that original piece.
Yeah. I mean, I was at Home Goods the other day looking for something, and you walk around and you can see there's Girl with the Pearl Earring by Vermeer, there's a Rembrandt. And some people are cool with that, having a print on their wall of a famous painting. Other people would rather have a no-name artist, but it's an original.
Yeah.
I like to be surrounded by originals, even if I don't know who the artist is. But
Yep. Yeah, no, you had me and Claude by the house to see the collection and get some pictures, which, hopefully we'll have up on our website at some point to inspire people.
It's always fun having people into the house, because I always like to see their reaction, because I don't think a lot of houses look like that.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming. And then if you have somebody like Claude, who's an artist, and to see it with his eye, and to see the inspiration on his face as he's going around taking pictures, like that makes me so happy.
Yeah.
To share what I think looks cool with people, and to, even when it's a negative, at least it's making them feel something. You know?
Yeah. No, it's a ton of stuff. And you said when I walked in there, it's like, wow, like when the hell did Dan start collecting these things? Because there's so much.
Yeah.
Going
back, ever since I was a little kid, I was a collector.
Yep.
I started with collecting rocks, and I had a pet rock that I called Michelob because my father was a drinker. He liked his beers. So I had Michelob, and then I went from rocks into G.I. Joes and things like that. And what I would do is Star Wars figures, G.I. Joes, I would set up these like scenes on my bed of battle scenes or what's going on, and then I would sleep on the floor. Yeah. And my mother would come in and she'd be like, "Why are you sleeping on the floor?" I was like, "I don't want to mess up my scene I got going on the bed." So I was always collecting things. But in 5th grade, we took a field trip to the Museum of Fine Arts. Yep. And I walked in, and I remember I was 10 yeyears old, and I remember seeing the Copley painting, the Daughters of Edward Boyd, I think it's called. Okay. It's one of the prized possessions of the MFA. I remember at 10 years old standing in front of it. It's a huge painting. And
is that Copley, or is that the
It's Sergeant.
Sergeant, yeah. Okay.
Did I say Copley?
Yeah.
Sergeant. Yep. And I was blown away by that. And I went back to school that day, and there was a kid who was a really good artist in my class, and I was like, "Listen, man, will you draw me something, and I'll give you $5. I'll give you my lunch money." So I hired this kid at 10 to like make some art for me.
Do you still have that one?
No, I wish I still had it. But the funny thing is, he had done like 2 pieces for me, and I was giving him all the lunch money I had. I was skipping meals to buy art, and he got in trouble because his mother came home. He was supposed to be doing his homework, and he was making art for sale. And so that put an end to that commission.
Okay, is he still producing? Or?
He's still making art. So his name was Jeff. If you see this, Jeff. He was a really talented artist, and I knew quick that I had very little artistic ability on paper. But like making the scenes of the G.I. Joe guys, like I always liked design, decorating, staging. Like I could do that. But the having real artistic talent missed me.
Yeah. Well, I think that a lot of that is, that's artistic talent too, right?
Yeah. In a way,
people pay to have that done.
Yeah.
So that's important. Yeah. You're also kind of like an influencer, right?
Yeah. It's one of those buzzwords of the day, right?
Yeah.
But I like sharing what I like and what I think looks great, and to get positive feedback on that feels good. So I'm happy to influence.
Yeah, I think you do a great job at it, and I seen the pictures on Instagram before we got to the house. I mean, the staging is unbelievable, and then seeing it in person is even, seeing the still pictures, you never know what, especially when you've seen things staged before. It's like, oh, it looks great right here, but what's going on around it? Yeah. So walking through the house and seeing, how they all connected, like how the, your study connects to the stairwell,
Yeah. So what I found in my design is I like to have like one color on the floor so that every room flows together. Yep. And then I try to keep it consistent with my framing, not the same style, but at least the same tones of frame so that they all kind of work together. And I was lucky enough to find you guys to come in here and to find my framer, Dina, who's amazing. Yeah. And what you guys do for me is lead me away from my comfort zone. Yeah. Being in the antiques business originally, I always would go for the warm wood frames and the antique wood frames, and those look good on the right piece. Yeah. But you guys have a tendency, and Dina especially, to lead me towards the modern, streamlined when it's appropriate. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes when, from our standpoint, you don't always know where it's going to end up. It's always helpful when people bring in pictures or you describe, those things. But, it's art first, and then, we're kind of creating it and, enhancing it a bit, and then making sure it fits into the house.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at the difference a frame can make on a piece. I've had some pieces that just don't speak to me, and then in the right frame, it's like, bam, they sweep you off your feet. It's pretty cool.
No, it's fun. Now, when you told me the story about the first piece that you collected when we were out there. Yeah. You've obviously don't have a problem making decisions and purchasing art, and I think that's something that people kind of miss out on sometimes. Like, I feel like there's like hang-ups, or people don't know if they like something, or they don't know a story behind it. So sometimes I feel like they need that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so many of my friends are going to their house, and there's nothing wrong with family portraits, but sometimes people think the whole house has to be family portraits or everything. And so with my friends, I start saying, you can mix these in, have a few around the house, and then mix in other pieces that speak to you. Yeah. And I think that's the hard part for people collecting art is they don't trust their own taste sometimes. And they're afraid that if they put it on the wall, they're saying to everybody, this is what I think is beautiful. And that puts yourself out there to
Yep.
criticism, even if they don't say anything to you, you know. But I always look at it as art either speaks to you or it doesn't. And sometimes it literally will like sweep you away. And that's the stuff I try to buy, you know, that I get lost in, or when I see it and I'm like, oh man, this reminds me of a happy time in my life, and therefore I want to look at that all the time, you know. So having the antique shop, I used to buy with my own taste and put it all together and hope that people liked it, you know. Which is what I try to do at home too. But the alternative was, I know that not everyone was going to like my style of art, so I try to mix in some other styles too into the shop to reach all tastes. But
yeah, and where do you, you know, most of the stuff that you're finding these days that you've purchased? I mean, you still going and searching things out like antiques or paintings?
Yeah, I'm addicted to the hunt, the search, finding new things, and I buy high and I buy low. So I've bought from galleries and spent a lot of money on a piece that I thought was amazing, and then I'll be at the Marshfield flea market buying stuff for, you know, a couple bucks that I think looks cool, and then framing it up, you know, and passing it on. So a lot of things, as you saw at my house, I can't fit a lot of stuff anymore. So if I buy a piece I love, something's got to come down, and I'll either move that along just to someone else, give it to a family member, sell it online, send it to auction. But yeah, I buy at auction, I buy on estate sales, I buy on house calls. And now when I get into a house for records, I'll ask them, do you have any art that you know that you want to sell, or rugs?
The rugs are a big thing too.
Yeah, people still love. So the way that design shifted, people kind of, especially the younger generation, the millennials, they didn't really want antiques for a little while. And I think it's coming back now, that they're tired of the stuff at IKEA breaking down, and they're looking for quality made things that'll last a while, you know. So I think we're heading back that way to an appreciation towards antiques now. But it went through a tough time. You could buy whole living room sets at auction for $100, you know. So it was kind of crazy. But
now it was the records like a nice transition from the antiques, or were those like landing in your lap too in some of the same places?
So yes, as records caught back on in popularity, you'd start seeing them at antique malls and flea markets, and out in Brimfield, which is, you know, 3-time yearly antique sale out in Brimfield, Mass. You'd see more and more dealers that would have records. So after I closed my shop, I was in a group shop in Cohasset, and I had my own booth there. I had one bin of records, and what I saw quickly is that the records were selling like crazy, and the furniture and everything else was kind of sitting for a while. So my booth became more records. And my collection at home got beyond 3,000 records, and there were records on the floor. And so my wife was like, all right, we got to draw the line somewhere. so I was like, all right, I don't need 3,000 records. I can be happy with 1,000 records. And so then I opened up my online record business. And I rented an office space in Marshfield, and now I'm open once a month to the public there. And that gives me the rest of the month to be out searching for cool stuff.
And that works for you, that worked pretty well, you said?
Yeah, it's building up every month that I open. You know, the word spreads word of mouth, and I have my regulars. And the funny thing about record collectors is oftentimes they don't want everyone to know about the honey hole they found of good records. So the word of mouth tends to spread slow among the real collectors. But for the average people that just want records to listen to at home, that's spreading, and I'm seeing more and more new faces every month.
So there's a range of pricing on records, I assume, like some that are just to be functional and listened to, and some that have like a value.
Definitely. There's records for every budget. And, you know, some collectors like the scratch and pop of a record. Like, that's why they're into it, is for the surface noise. You know, the famous quote was, someone said, how can you listen to records? They have surface noise. And I forget who said it, but they were like, man, life has surface noise. Like, that's the patina. That's the accumulation of people listening to the music, you know? And other times, I have records in the shop. I have a dollar room. You know, they go $1, $3. And then I have records on the wall for $700, $800. So it's all, like anything, supply and demand and condition. A lot of the privately pressed records that didn't get a lot of numbers made are worth a lot of money, whereas something like Sgt. Pepper's, there were literally millions and millions of copies made. So people might think, oh, I have a Beatles record, it's worth a fortune. Whereas your rare jazz record that you've never heard of, the jazz musician, could be worth way more.
It's interesting now with do you have to have the knowledge on what the sounds of the music are too, or are
Yeah.
you just dealing?
Yeah, so there's two ways you grade a record.
Yeah.
It's visual grading, and then there's an audio grading. You grade the sleeve and you grade the record. And there's what they call the gold mine standard. So it's
Yep.
kind of boring, but it goes through from a G, meaning good,
Yep.
VG, VG plus, excellent, near mint, and mint. You only ever use mint if a record's sealed. And
Yep.
so, yeah, a lot of my day is cleaning records, grading the records, giving them a quick listen, and then writing up the description and getting them online for sale. I started out, I only wanted to do high-priced records,
Yep.
collectible records, but when I decided to open one day to the public, you can't only have
Yeah.
high-end stuff. I need stuff for everybody. So now it's pretty much a full record shop, full-service record shop.
So you brought in the classic, and most of the records have some aspect of art on them on the jackets.
Yes. That's one of the coolest things about collecting records is, it can be your art collection for way cheaper than buying paintings, right?
Yep.
And to me, it's cooler than buying a print because it's an actual piece, that everyone handled, and it's not a recent reissue print. But the artwork is amazing. This one I brought in especially because it tells a story of a time. The Beatles were sick and tired of being the Beatles, and they wanted to be Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band for a little while. So you can see the younger Beatles here, and then their new personas that they were adopting. And there's hidden messages in here. They've kind of played with the idea of Paul McCartney being dead, the Paul down here, and the left-handed guitars. He was a left-handed bass player. So it's interesting, a little shot of the Stones over here. So there's a whole story going on in the images, and if you open this up, Paul McCartney has his back turned to the audience, which they thought was another sign that he's dead and he's been replaced by somebody. So, and that conspiracy theory still goes on today.
What, he's still dead?
Yeah, that he was replaced with someone else. They'll show you images of his ears not lining up. So, I have a friend who's a conspiracy theorist. And I told her one time, I saw him at Fenway Park, and she said, "Or did you?"
Yeah. Yeah. So you have there's some on the wall too. I think we framed a couple of records for you.
Yeah.
I feel like we've done a few things with the records and like showing them as art, and I think I agree with you. It's definitely something that it's like it's an object, so it's and it's a little bit more personable. So
definitely. And what's happened is we have young kids who have never had a sensorial experience with music. They've had their phones, their iPod, or whatever, streaming, and so they've never really, in some cases, listened to a whole record. They listen to the hits.
Yep.
They've never held it in their hands, pulled it off the shelf. And so what is cool for me is I get to see the first experience with kids finding records, and then I get to see people with nostalgia who had these records in the 60s and 70s, and their parents sold them, or they got washed out in the basement, and they get to recapture something of their youth. So it's really cool to see people get so turned on by music and this resurgence in vinyl.
Yep. And what year would that have come out?
67.
So that's going on what it's at 50 plus. It's almost
It makes me crazy to think about that because I still think about the 80s as 20 years ago. So it's like, it's a long time. And that 67 was the summer of love. So much great music came out in 67. It's the year that my dad graduated from high school. So I'm like, oh man, you were so lucky. I grew up with grunge and I loved the 90s, but to grow up in 67 and have the Doors and the Stones and Zeppelin and the Beatles and all those guys pumping out music.
The other thing that I find interesting about that, so 67, so that's been, in that press, you think that record is from, that jacket's from 67, so you just picked that up, but what's the story behind it? Like, did that person have it for 60 years?
Yeah, that was her copy. She bought
kidding?
that. She bought that in 67. And when I got there, I just bought it yesterday. Happened to have it in the car with me. But, I went into her house, and she had her crate of 60s records. She had a little bit of 70s, not much. And then she had 2 crates of 80s records. So it looks like she took some time off in the 70s. But she went right from the Beatles and Elvis, and then it was, Culture Club and Dirty Dancing soundtrack and Bryan Adams and all the 80s stuff that everyone was into. So.
And did she have trouble parting with it, or just closing the door?
She was ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny. Sometimes people will call me in, and I'll get there, and they think they're ready until I start offering them cash for something, and then they're like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a while. You have to check on them every once in a while, see when they're ready to sell.
Yeah.
And other people are like, get these out of here. Take them for free, and I'm like, no, they're worth money. Let me give you fair price. Sometimes people are amazed at what records are
It's,
worth now.
it's funny too that people don't want to like hold on to a couple, you know?
Yeah, you would think, right? Or what gets me upset is like my kids don't. They're like, my kids don't want them.
Yeah.
You know, I can't find anybody that will take them.
Yeah.
That kind of makes me sad. And then I'll be like, I appreciate them. I think they're great. I'll take them and
Yeah.
we'll find them a good home.
Yeah.
So that makes people happy.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean that they feel a lot better that you have them than they end up in a.
Yeah, you know what it is? A lot of people, they want you to appreciate their taste, and they want to appreciate that they kept them so long and they kept them in good shape. And I do find them good homes, and
Yeah.
that's great. And a lot of people that sell me records, they'll come back into the shop and like visit them. You know,
Really?
they'll be like, "Oh, there's my records. It's priced right. It's going well." So
No kidding.
yeah.
Is there serial numbers or anything like that on them?
So
too?
there's matrix numbers. So
Yeah.
when you pull the vinyl out, the way that we determine what pressing it is in what they call the dead wax. It's the ring around the center of the record.
Mm-hmm.
They have to etch numbers in there, so you know exactly when it was pressed. You know what pressing plant it was pressed at.
No kidding.
Because it makes a big difference on whether you have a first press or a later press, or
Mm-hmm.
and not only for collectability but sound quality.
Yep.
So there's a great website that I use as a tool online. It's called Discogs, which is short for discography, and they will give you a lot of the best information about identifying a pressing of a record and why this one is important to have or why this one nobody wants. And a lot of times it's the way it was mastered. So there's a producer and there's a master mastering these records and deciding how they're going to sound on vinyl. Sometimes they knock it out of the park and it sounds transcendent. Other times it sounds like the singer's in a closet. So you'll get that feedback on Discogs, and that will tend to skew the prices up. If a record sounds really good, more people want it.
Yep. Now, is there a lot of people that are just keeping them in sleeves? Or people buying them now and like tucking them aside?
Definitely. Yeah, there's people that are starting to treat them like stocks.
Yeah.
And this happened with baseball cards, and it
Yeah.
happened with comic books. And the reason they chose those two was because they came up with a grading system. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I've seen. I collected baseball cards when I
Yeah.
was a kid, and
So did I. Yeah.
but yeah, I understand it a little bit. I mean, my son has got a bunch of baseball cards, and some of them are in like special little containers.
Yeah.
But
So you send them away to this third-party authenticator and grader,
Yep.
and they send you back an encapsulated card that you can no longer touch or feel because it has to stay encapsulated.
Yep.
Comic book too, you can't read it. But if you can get a 10, a mint rating, it'll make your copy worth 100 times what
Yep.
a 7 is worth. So, and I think that's coming into records too. People are going to start sending them to third-party authenticators, and what troubles me with that is you don't get to use it for its purpose anymore. Then you'd have to have a listening copy and a graded copy, and when you start grading it, I think it brings in speculators, and they start treating it like stock market.
yeah, so the thing that confuses me on that end, and with the baseball cards too, is like, if you're the person producing them, like what's stopping them from producing like an extra 100 and just sitting them in a trailer or
very
in
true.
storage for 20 years, and
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, how do you know? It's like like almost like a counterfeit bill, or
Yeah.
or just like you're holding something back and you're manipulating the price in a sense, right?
Yeah, well, definitely. And what came about, especially with baseball cards, is they
Yep.
did limited editions. So it started out with, there's only 500 of this card, so this
Yep.
is the one to get. Now they're doing what they call one of ones. So
Yep.
there's only one number of pressed of those, made
Yep.
of those, and it will often be signed or have a piece of the
Yep.
shirt of it,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
I've
they'll
seen
get that
some of those.
graded,
Yep.
and now that's worth a fortune. So, yeah, in the record business, there aren't many one of ones.
Yep.
They'll limit pressings. There's a whole thing called Record Store Day where they specifically put out some new records and some represses of old records, but they'll manipulate the market by only putting out 2,000 copies and generating a buzz within
Yeah.
the collecting community. And it was smart. It meant to drive people to small independent record shops, and it
Yeah.
worked. Now on Record Store Day, there's a line outside of most shops.
Yeah, I've seen some of those. Seen some pictures of,
Yeah.
of John's place.
Yeah,
and,
yeah. Line out. He did drone footage of the line outside. It's awesome.
yeah.
I don't do a lot of new records. My business is used old records,
Yep.
so I'm not part of Record Store Day.
Yep.
But I support the stores that are.
Yeah. And so you're still buying new stuff too.
Yeah. Just like my walls, when I buy something goes up, something has to come down. With my
Yep.
record collection, when I buy new records, I'll call from my collection and bring them into the shop.
Yep. Now, you have a certain amount that you keep at the house. There seemed like there was a lot.
There's a lot, yeah. So I think it's about around 1,500 at my house. I wanted to keep it to 1,000, but
are you trying to sneak some in, or is it?
My wife is very
she knows
understanding. As long as they're not on the floor, she's cool. So I have some nice bookcases that I can keep them in, and I'm always making room for them. So
yeah. And the antique's still something you keep an eye on, or?
I do, mostly for buying, personal shopping for people who are looking for things. I have contacts still, friends, and I still love antiques. I just don't have the source to buy them and sit on them and wait for them to sell. So now if I have a customer that wants me to find something for them, I'll buy it. I still go to Brimfield every year, which I love.
So you're still working for a few people to help them,
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, both art, furniture, rugs, everything. Yeah, lamps. So
nice.
Yeah, that's fun. Keeps my
you
foot in the
picking
door.
up new clients on that, or is that something that you're just doing for a select group of people?
It's usually a select group. If someone likes my style and they want me to do it, I'll do it, and I work cheaply. So because I love doing it, So I like being out there and finding something, especially when I don't have to spend my money. It's good.
Yeah, it's like you're hunting, needle in the haystack type of thing.
I fulfill the pleasure of being out there hunting, and I don't have to worry about where I'm going to fit it at my house.
Well, what happens if you see something you have to have?
That happens, and then something else will come out.
Yeah, because you're kind of at capacity.
Yeah, I don't want it to. I like the fact that it feels like a museum where you can touch everything. I don't want it to feel stuffy. I'm definitely a maximalist as opposed to a minimalist, and I get minimalism. I think it's cool, and I can design in minimalist. But for me, I love being surrounded by beautiful things. I always have.
Did you have a design background, or is that?
No, my background was history, and and no one in my family ever liked it. No one in my family was ever a collector either, which kind of shocked me. My brother, who's the one that got me into collecting records, he collects records, but most of my mom and dad never collected anything, and so it was just kind of built in me. But I remember having no money when after I was hiring the kids in my class commission work. I was working at the mall in Braintree. I was selling men's suits. So I got into fashion, and I loved fashion magazines, and I couldn't afford art, so I was going around and getting ready-made frames and framing up magazines and hanging them on my wall, which people thought was weird too. I was like, it's inspiration. It's
Yeah, well, I mean, what you surround yourself with is important too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think sometimes when I'm thinking about it and looking in people's houses, and seeing things on the wall, like what, I don't know. I mean, hopefully some of the things have a meaning behind them. You know, I mean, the meaning being like, it matched my couch. It is depressing to me.
Absolutely.
I feel like things that people have on the wall, it doesn't necessarily have to be an expensive piece of art, but it should have like a reason why it's there.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's one of the most personal choices you can make, right?
Yeah.
Designing and deciding what you're going to surround yourself with every day. So, yeah, I feel the exact same way. I'm the same way. I'm covered up in tattoos.
Yeah.
I'm not go to the tattoo shop and, that's a cool fox.
Yeah.
Let me get that. My tattoos have personal meaning to me too, and I remember exactly why I got everyone and what it meant to me at the time. And that's why I'm not a big believer in covering up. I'm like, don't cover up the mistake. Embrace the mistake that you made. At some point in your life, you thought this tattoo, this tribal sun, was killer, and you needed one. So keep it, known it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm the same way about artwork. And but the good thing about artwork at the house is you live with it for a little while, and then if it's not speaking to you anymore, you find someone else that it can speak to.
Yeah. So you transition. You're not just throwing things out.
Yeah. No, I try not to throw, especially art.
Yeah.
I try not to throw much away.
Yeah. I mean, I wish people would take more, chances on things, and if you like it in that moment, own it and buy it. I mean, I definitely have a ton of pieces that from when I first started buying artwork that kind of tuck that aside.
You move on, right? You evolve. Your taste evolves.
I haven't figured out a way to unload them yet, but plus I have a pile of stuff that that I created too. That I'm like, that was like a phase I was in where I was painting regularly, and then I look at some of them and I'm like, Jesus, that's junk, but I don't want to throw it out.
I get it, and I like that your little display you have in the woods too.
Frames, frames,
You always got a place over there, and you hang up some stuff. It looks cool.
Well, maybe I should just put some of the art out there too.
Something that'll weather nice.
Giving up on. It might turn it into something nice. Yeah, the frames. I feel like I don't want to just throw them out. At least that gives them a little bit more life. I mean, obviously the weather,
But that's cool too, right? It's going to get patina on, it's going to get weathered, but it's fun to see things in places you don't expect them, right?
Yeah,
That's what I like out there.
I have a pile of them. I'm just waiting for the weather to get a little cooler outside, and then we'll get Max back out there screwing them to trees.
Yeah, like you said about people taking the risk, I think a good place to start if people are feeling overwhelmed is to buy one piece that you really love and that really speaks to you. Hang that, live with it for a little while, and then see how that evolves your taste into putting other things around it. And you can make them work together with the framing, or you can make them work together with the styles, or you can just go eclectic like me at my house. But taking the first step of buying something that you like because you like it, and not because you saw it in a magazine or because you think you're supposed to like it.
Well, I think so the last show that we had was nice too, and you had people that are buying work too because they want to support a friend or somebody that's getting started. Getting some of those people will probably want to get in early, but I mean that's like part of the hunt, right? Like finding an artist who's emerging or
Yeah, I think that's why what you guys do is great here. Because you're putting real art made by local artists in people's hands and giving them the ability to buy it at a reasonable price, which I think is fantastic. A lot of people get overwhelmed by going to galleries in Boston or New York, and you're paying outrageous gallery prices. Like, these are affordable works that are done by local people, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, and they have it, and then you have a story too, and that's why I'm trying to focus with. We're letting Jade make those books and getting the people's background, trying to like put them onto the website so that you see the piece, but then you also know a little bit about the person too. Yeah. And to me, I think that that's important because sometimes that's that last thing, like, I want to buy that because that person, they're also from Marshfield, or they live down the street, and there's so many different artists around here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best part about collecting, is getting to know the subject that you're collecting, and so if you get to know the artist really well. The first piece that I bought when we got our first condo, I showed you at the my house. She's an artist from Pittsburgh named Heather Kraft, and I love her work. I found her online, fell in love with her style, and now I probably own 30 of her paintings. And we have a back and forth correspondence going back for 15, 20 years or whatever. That is awesome. And I got to see her grow as an artist, and I got to see my taste in her work change. And then that branched off into other artists that I saw that had completely different work, because I had done this style of collecting for a while. Let me try something new. So.
Yeah. Now, just 'cause I'm overwhelmed by the amount of information, do you have this stuff written down? Do you know, do you have a log of what you have and what the stories are, or do you just keep it all in your head?
Keep it in my head mostly. Yeah, the stories. I will print out some artist information if I get an artist that I'm not familiar with. I'll print out some information and put it back behind the frame. When anything happens to me, people will have some information there with the piece. Which I think is cool. I have books on the big artists at home. I have a research library of artists and styles, movements that I love flipping through and reading through. I mean, the chances that I'm going to find a Degas at a flea market are low, but I'm always studying. You never know what you're going to turn up. So,
no, I think that your collection is great, and when we were walking through, it's like you had you knew every piece. I mean, when I walk through my house and I look at some of the stuff, I know most of the people personally, and that's the angle that I'm trying to collect is to support people who support who are supporting me. But there's also some of those people are fantastic artists.
I see the works that come through here. It's fantastic.
It's
photography, painting, everything. It's just,
I just don't know if I have the capacity to remember all that. That stuff. That's why we're gonna document it with the website. And try to put that information out for everybody.
Yeah, it's better to have it documented, because I always think I know every single piece, where I got it, how much I paid for it, the story behind it, but no one else does. And so it would be better to have that written down somewhere, so that at least
Yeah, I mean, I think some the auction houses, do they have a lineage of where?
Yeah, they have the provenance on most pieces that they sell. And then if you buy something at auction, that's always on there. The auction records are going to stay there. So anybody that can look up that painting will see that he bought this at auction 30 years ago. That's easy to find.
Have you taken part in a bunch of those type of things?
Not a bunch, but definitely, yeah.
Enough that you understand the process.
Yeah, and they've made it so easy now. Auctions used to be the place where just dealers went, and it was very overwhelming. And dealers would go in rare books or paintings or anything, and it was like an old boys club, and they would it was insulated, and they would buy and then resell to the public. Well, now the public has access to these auctions online. You can go and preview in person. In Massachusetts, we have several really good ones. One down the Cape that I go to all the time is Eldred's. And their previews are awesome. Skinner was in Boston. They sold to a bigger company now, but I've gone to auctions in there. Yeah, they're a lot of fun. And that's when you can step up your game, and sometimes you can get away with a real bargain.
Really?
Yeah.
No, how did you just from the dealing of the antiques, or just something that
What I found is that when you're dealing in antiques, you can't be buying from other dealers all the time and selling because there's not enough margin. So you got to go to auctions, and you got to get in on the ground floor and hope things sneak through the cracks and do that way. But I always bought things that I loved. That way, if
it was
I got stuck with them, I wouldn't mind having it on my wall, which was cool with me. When I started buying for other people's tastes, and then you get stuck with it, then you're double mad, So.
Yeah. I spent a lot of money on this,
and I still have it.
I mean, that's tough too, because then how do you give somebody an honest feeling of like, you should be having this, just because I don't want it.
If I don't believe in it, I'd much rather be able to sell something on something that I believe in.
So I've been a part of a couple art associations and places. You hear people, there's some art there. We should do something with. Recycling this art, and like, we can, sell it and we can raise money. It's like, well, I mean, how do you tell somebody they should have this piece of art that you no longer like? Or, it's not good enough to be in my house, but it would be great in yours.
Can't see it from my house. I have a funny story. One time I was, after I closed the antique shop, I had a bunch of stuff left over. And I set up at a flea market. And I had paintings just stacked up everywhere. And I was selling some, but it was kind of dead. And this guy come up, and he started making piles of paintings. And I was like, oh, my God, this guy loves my taste.
Yeah.
He's buying a big stack of paintings. And I talked to him about them, and he's like, these are really amazing. And he gives me his card, and he was the director of the Museum of Bad Art.
Oh, really?
He was buying a bunch of pieces for a new showing of Bad Art. I was like, oh, my God.
No kidding.
But I took it in stride, and they sold some paintings.
Did you go and visit them at the museum?
I was too embarrassed. Oh, that was mine. That was mine.
Did you keep the card?
Yeah, I still have it somewhere.
Well, I mean, again, like it's tough to decide that something's good or something is bad, right?
Some people love black light velvet Elvis paintings, and they have the whole house filled with them. It just depends on what you find cool.
Yeah, and I think that maybe even if you own bad art, right? If you own it and you're proud to show it off, it's like
and maybe it reminds you of something that's not bad, So it's all beauty's in the eye of the beholder, as they say. Yeah.
Now, do you? I know you've picked up a couple pieces of local people. Is there an area that you're of artwork you look at, or do you get involved in any of the art associations around here?
I haven't been. I love going to the South Shore Art Center when they have a show, or the St. James Library, or here. So I love coming and checking out artists. I don't belong to any of the associations, but I love supporting local artists. I come here at Christmas time, and you guys always have good choices for gifts that I'll buy, and some I keep at my house.
Yep. The one of Shauna's, that piece that's a great piece.
It's so cool, and I got that because most mornings when I wake up, I can look out my front window and see a deer staring back at me. So it really spoke to me again. But I bought some work by a few other artists here too that I really like.
Yeah, no, I think it's in. I mean, the other thing about buying local too, I feel like you feel like you're supporting someone too, right?
Yeah.
And if you buy from somebody that takes off, and then they you feel like you're part of that journey, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Or you contributed to them,
Yeah, and you're helping out, both you as a local small business owner and the artist. So to me, it's an absolute no-brainer. And oftentimes I can buy art here, it's already framed.
Yeah.
And the price is reasonable because I know how, framing can be expensive. Yeah. So like when you guys frame it already, I'm like, oh, this is a double deal. So.
Yeah. Especially if you don't have to redo it.
Right? Yeah, I won't. I usually don't buy things in a new frame that I have to do.
Yeah.
Old frames for sure. But.
No, I mean, some of those old frames that you have in your, antique frames are pretty awesome too.
Yeah, and you guys even have the antique glass, which I love.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll have the right piece, and we'll get a nice piece of wavy antique glass. It just makes it You know,
Yeah, is there a big market for antique frames too?
definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with the you know, if you have a really nice original impressionist painting,
Yeah.
you want a gilt impressionist frame. You know, reproduction is okay, but
Yeah.
you want it in the period frame. So yeah, there's a huge market. I have friends that just deal in antique frames.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I'll have to have you connect me to one of those people and have.
You would love to
I'd
have
love
her
to have
here.
that conversation. That would be fun.
Yeah, she's in Atlanta now, but she got her start in New York City, and she would she was a bartender at night.
Yeah.
And then she would go to the flea markets when it was dark out in the morning, and she would fill both arms with frames, and then
Yeah.
she would ride the train and hold on, arms
kidding.
filled, and then she would take them uptown and sell them to the galleries.
Yep.
Yeah. She would be a really good interview for her.
Yeah, no, that's. I mean, I've read articles about that sort of thing. I think New York was, I mean, obviously because they have such a strong art scene,
Yeah,
right?
and all the galleries need the period
Yeah.
frames, so.
Yeah, no, that would definitely be a fun conversation for
Yeah.
me. Yeah. So you get to some of the places, see, is that finding out about the new artists and like local artists of interest to you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm always on the search for something new, something that
Yep.
I think is creative and
Yeah, I saw the
different.
skateboards were cool.
Yeah, he was a local kid, Brian Huntress from Rockland.
Yep.
And he does work on skateboards, and he has this really like zombie aesthetic to his work,
Yep.
you know, that I think is really cool. And I probably have 5 or 6 of his paintings. I went to his studio. So yeah, I found him first. He was at Inclusion
Yep.
Record Shop. His work was there with John and Bobby. And then I bought those, and then I went to his studio and I bought a bunch of other pieces. I love going to artist studios.
Yeah.
Like when some people come to my house to feel inspiration, that's where I feel inspiration, to be so close to that creative energy. Is
Yeah,
awesome.
I think that it's such a cool thing to see too.
Yeah.
And I actually, when Allison was on last week, she was talking about it. She did a series of photographs from the artist studios, and she was just trying to get like the paint and like just like interesting objects.
Yeah.
And and she described it too, like this guy who does a lot of stuff, and it was a mess, but his studio was like nice and clean.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just funny to see the people's personalities in there, and like what's hanging up in the wall in there. Like, what is it, like nice and orderly? How many paintings are they working
Yeah.
on?
What's the light, right? The
Yeah,
light is
it's
huge.
Yeah, just to understand. I think that's like that's something else I want to like explore and try to push out there, just because I think it's fun. And I mean, I've been fortunate enough to go to plenty of artists' studios and see where they work and like see where that creative process is, and it's it's cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I popped at Sergio's after I was visiting you, and like I always like seeing his stuff, and he's got stuff on the wall like awards and like like his some of his history, and then you see some of the everything that's in the works.
Yeah.
Now,
does he collect other artists?
he had a bunch of other artists. He had
Cool.
that one I showed you downstairs of Ross Farbush's.
Yeah.
That's actually going to South Shore to for a fundraiser. Somebody had got their hands on that, and we
Nice.
donated some framing for that. I'm really excited about how that one came out.
Yeah.
But he had one of her pieces. I know he had a piece of Diane Panarelli Miller's at his place. And I think he has a bunch from. He had some really nice stuff.
I bet. Like that's what really gets me going, is like to be in an artist's house, or
to
see an artist collection.
Yeah, to see like, because you very rarely go into an artist's house, and they generally have a lot of their stuff on the wall too, right? Because they have to display it, or sometimes staging it is nice, but to see who artists collect, right? It's kind of cool.
And I'm always wondering if they collect in their style, or they collect something that's completely different than their style.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it'd be weird to go into somebody's, that looks just like something you would produce,
Yeah, yeah. You would think, like, if you're a landscape painter, you'd collect other things. I wonder though. I'm sure there are landscape painters who collect landscapes too.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and I feel like that'll be a good good series of videos to create at some point. Just have to, I keep having people saying that they'll let me come to their place, but then like I don't want them to clean up, or I want to see it like authentic,
especially a studio. Yeah, you want to see it how they work in it, or else what's the point, right?
Yeah. Do you get up to the place in Rockland, the fourth floor, when they do the open studios up there?
Oh, yeah. Like the Sandpaper Factory?
Yeah.
I have. I go to as many of those as I can.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff in there
Yeah,
too.
I bought some beautiful like glazed terracotta pieces by this
Yeah.
artist that I loved, and I had never had anything like that. You
Yeah,
know?
it's funny. Every time I go up there, I feel like I see someone that, like, they don't necessarily show around here, or I'm not familiar with them. I feel like I know a lot of artists because they come in and frame stuff,
Sure.
but sometimes there's people I don't have a relationship with. So it's a fun place to go to. And
I think that's a big step for a lot of artists. Is sometimes they have the studio and they're creating the work, but putting it out there and being like, I'm going to sell this.
Yeah.
That's a big step for a lot of them to take.
Yeah, it is. And then sometimes I've had conversations with plenty of people too, like, to trying to figure out how to price it. Price it enough so it'll sell, but at the same time, they don't want to part with it because you created something that's important to you.
Sure. Yeah, I can imagine that's difficult to part with some of them. When you spend so much time on it, and it must really help for them to know whose house it's going to.
Yeah,
and, that it's going to be taken care of.
Yeah, in a good spot.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's interesting. I don't. I feel bad too. When people ask me for advice on how to price it, I'm like, I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I guess you have to start selling a couple, and then then you can raise the prices. Or
and the hard part for me coming from the antique shop background was it was impossible to pay some gallery prices because there was no secondary market for the work. So once the artist gets into that secondary market and they're reselling paintings for like Sergio, has a secondary market, that really helps. And antique dealers will then start seeking those paintings out because they know they can not just sell them for the gallery price.
Yeah, art's it's a funny thing. When you say you've been to people's houses and you're trying to, you don't need all these family portraits on the wall.
Yeah.
You should. Is that something you've had good luck with inspiring people to do?
Only a few. I've gone back and they're like, well, I didn't take that advice.
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to give me the formula. So
And I'll only give that advice to people that I really trust. I would never go into someone else that I didn't know well and be like, hey, take the family down.
Yeah.
But I just feel like I go into so many places that are all white, and there's the wedding photo over the mantle, and there's the kids' photos, and I'm like, I love my kid too,
Yeah, no, I mean, I think some of those are nice to have.
Yeah.
And I have gallery walls at home too, but like, I mean,
and you can mix them in.
Yeah,
I have them mixed in with my pieces, so that it's not an overwhelming sense of it's all photography, it's all family, but you can scatter a few throughout. It looks great.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think having those photographs, and I don't know. I mean, I'd feel like I'd rather keep those digital, and so you have that record and have something else on the wall that's more inspiring. But I guess to some people, probably seeing a picture of your happy family, maybe that's the inspiration that they need too.
Yeah,
right.
And we'll see when my daughter leaves for school next year.
How many?
I start bringing out all these photos. Right?
You'll change your taste.
Yeah, we'll see.
Interesting. Well, any more advice you want to give us about framing records?
What I love about when you guys frame my records is, and if you guys have records at home that you want to get framed, you can do them with the double glass.
Yeah.
So you can see the back of them. It's awesome. You can even float them in oversized frame.
Yeah.
So then you see all the edges of the records. I was reading something the other day that said, right now, half the people that buy records don't own a turntable.
Yeah.
So there's something about records beyond listening to them that people are really being drawn to, whether it's the artwork or owning music.
Yep.
So I think that framing would be great for them, right? If they're not going to listen to it and you want to own it as an object, come in here, get a ready-made frame or have it custom framed.
Yeah,
they look awesome.
I like the float. When they float a little bit, and you see the edge, you can really feel that it's an object.
Exactly.
Or like we did a few of. I did some for my daughter, some Taylor Swift ones. Yeah. And just pop the record out. A little bit, so it's in there.
You slide it out a little bit, and you see it, and you frame it in there, right?
Yeah, and sometimes they're in interesting colors too, so that like gives a pop of color for her room.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that. I like the idea that you can take them out and touch them too, because we've done a bunch for people too, with like the tabs on the back. So it's like you can actually take it out, pull the record out, play it.
That's awesome.
So
I didn't know that. That's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. You could have your frame for
frame
now playing. At the store.
Just what I need, Dave. Another obsession.
The store is Lyric Vendors.
Yes, Lyric Vendors. We're on Instagram.
Yeah.
at lyric underscore vendors. And I'm always open to the public the last Saturday of the month
Yep.
from 10 to 4. It's pretty cool. We have beer and bourbon and seltzer water if you want that. And
Yep.
we hang out, we listen to music. It's kind of like a little club feel,
Yeah.
speakeasy vibe.
A lot of the same people back on that
A
Saturday.
lot of same people, and then I definitely have regulars, and then I have new faces too. But then I'm also open by appointment anytime. So if anybody wants to come in and give a dig, you can just reach me on Instagram and come take a look.
Yeah, and then you got the personal Instagram where you're amassing a large following and
Yes.
influencing the public.
Yep, that's what would Cary Grant do.
What's
It was
this? What's the story behind that?
So I don't know if you remember when I was a little kid, TV38 did a show called The Movie Loft when we had like 4 channels, right?
Yeah.
And so it was TV38. I'd put that on, and Dana Hersey would come on, and he would introduce these old movies, and I was like, "What is this?" It was black and white, and they told a story.
Yeah.
So like when I was a kid in the 80s, the movies were Schwarzenegger and Stallone, and
Yeah.
things were
Oh, yeah.
blowing up, and I was like, "Oh, this is amazing."
Rambo,
and then I started watching.
Commando.
So I started watching these old movies, and they were all about dialogue and faces and situation comedy and slapstick, and I fell in love with the old movies of Cary Grant. I just thought he was awesome. He was
Yeah.
the best dresser. He was the coolest guy ever, and I was, 8 years old.
Yeah.
So that's what got me into one of my first real jobs was selling suits at Milton's in the Plaza
Yeah.
because Cary Grant always wore a suit. And
Yeah.
So I started that Instagram as like my design inspirations, clothing, paintings, whatever was hitting me that day.
Yeah, you're very well dressed. That's
Oh,
why
thank you.
that's why I put the button down shirt on. I got a clean hat today. I didn't want to look
Nice.
like a bum
You wore your
sitting next to you.
podcast best.
Yeah.
I like
yeah,
it.
exactly. Got clean shoes, clean
I
hat.
held off wearing a tie, so.
All right. I'll take the podcast to the next level.
Yep.
But awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming in, and I'm excited. I think this is a fun conversation. I think that there's definitely some things people can take away and hopefully inspire some people to buy some original art, take some chances, or
Yeah, awesome.
find somebody they know and trust. Like you, I'm sure that people ask you about what you think of some of their stuff.
People do, yeah, and sometimes they'll come to my house and they'll be like inspired and they'll be like, "Oh, can you find me something like this? Can you find me something like that?"
Yeah.
I've even hooked people up with my artist friend in Pittsburgh who I bought my first painting from.
Yep.
So she has about 4 buyers around here that buy her work now too. So
Yeah,
that's
I
cool.
think that my head's spinning from some of the things that you've said too, and I think that maybe sometimes somebody needs that. I don't know, like there's a whole market for art consultants, right? To justify the purchase, or maybe they just need a supportive friend who just tells them the right thing.
Yeah, I like being the supportive friend. I worry. I just have self-doubt about putting myself out there like to design full houses and stuff because I
Yeah.
don't have any design training. I wasn't, in school for interior design, so I
Yep.
doubt myself too. Just like artists doubt themselves putting out their first painting for sale.
Yep.
So I do it for friends, and sometimes I take tips. But
Yeah.
it's cool. You have the perfect place here to get people to take that first step for buying real
Yeah.
local art. So
Some of these things are when you look at the price of a painting and it's in the neighborhood of what it would cost you to take the family out to dinner,
Yeah.
and and you're going to continue to have that for
have it forever.
forever. I think that maybe people should. I don't know. I guess you have that experience forever, but I don't know. I feel like I've wasted a lot more money on dinners and booze than
agree.
than I have on paintings over the year.
And then when you have the paintings at home and you own them, what I love is moving them around the house. You put it in a different spot, it becomes new again. You start
Yeah.
looking at it again. If you hang it in the same spot forever, I have a tendency to stop even noticing it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get a good art collection at home, start shifting it around, moving it around.
Yeah, well, the whole design thing I think is interesting, and that kind of, I wish people would take more focus on that, the painting and the stuff on the walls being more important than like the couch or the table. I know there's some beautiful tables, especially in like the antique world, that have that story, and I think that's cool. But that's the Crate and Barrel one, and
Yeah. Your
that-
first
they
rule
got
is
that
your
at Whole
paintings
Foods.
do not have to match your couch.
Yeah.
Right? Like let the artwork speak for itself. It'll be better that way.
Yeah.
Let it make a statement.
Yeah.
And take a risk.
Yeah. I think in being at your place too, the other thing when you start to explain some of the stuff and share your knowledge on some of those pieces, it does change how I'm looking at something. I like the colors and I like the
Yeah.
like the face, and then you tell a little bit of a story behind it. It changes how you look at it too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's why when you go to a museum,
Yep.
walk around the museum first, then you do it with the guided tour.
Yep.
I mean, you learn so much more with the guided tour when they tell you the background of the painting. And then a painting I was just looked at and was like, when you get the background story on it, it comes alive, right?
Yeah.
That's what's great about art. But you need the information sometimes.
Yep. Well, get people more information. That's my mission here too. And like
Yeah.
Awesome. I appreciate you talking with me, Dan. I hope people find the find the inspiration they need, and hopefully we'll share some of those pictures from your house, and because it's beautiful and there's a lot of art there, a lot of books, a lot of everything.
There's a lot. Yep. Thanks so much for having me, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.